Merry Christmas! And just like many of you out there, one of my all-time favorite pastimes during the holiday season is to catch up on all the great Christmas movies out there. And now I felt like it's a perfect opportunity for myself to share some of my all-time favorite Christmas movies with all of you guys. And maybe we can compare notes and all that, because I'm pretty sure my top 5 list is a little bit different than yours. But let's get into it. My top 5 favorite Christmas movies. Let's go. Now, before I get into my top 5 list here, I must reiterate, these are my top Christmas movies, and I'm not saying that these are the best Christmas movies out there. Like I said before, a lot of the stuff on my list may be very different from yours. So take it for what it's worth, and these are, again, my opinions on what are the top movies for myself. Also, there are a couple of things I should mention from the top. I know a lot of people have this movie that is endearing to them, and they will say that this is one of their all-time favorite Christmas movies, but it didn't make my list, and that is National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. I know it might be blasphemy for a lot of you guys to hear it, but this was a movie that never really caught my attention back in the day. I never watched it when it first came out, and I only first watched it for the very first time last year. And to be quite honest, it didn't really hit me, and it didn't really reach out to me as an all-time favorite Christmas movie to watch during this time of year. It had its funny moments, and I can understand why a lot of people will consider this to be their top Christmas movie of all time, but it just didn't do it for me. Also, what's not on my list are some of the all-time classics out there. You got your Miracle on 34th Street, It's a Wonderful Life. These are classic movies. These are great movies, and I watched them when I was younger, and I may have watched it one or two other times growing up, but it's one of those. These are one of those movies that I can only watch once, and it's not something that I can watch over and over again. Not to take away from how great they are, it's just not those type of movies for me. I also do have one movie that I do consider a top favorite, but because of some unfortunate controversy behind a certain actor, it's not something that I will be talking about this time, but I could save that for a video in the future. Now I figured let's get one of the more controversial and overly debated movies out there when it comes to categorizing what a Christmas movie is or is not, and that is the classic Die Hard. Die Hard is a movie that came out in 1988. It stars Bruce Willis as his movie debut. We all knew Bruce Willis as a TV actor and musician. He was made famous by his role on Moonlighting. And like I said before, this is probably one of the more debated movies when it comes to stating what is a Christmas movie or what is not. But in my opinion, this is one of the only action Christmas movies that earned the infamous Christmas movie categorization, because it has everything that you need in a Christmas movie. You got the main character, John McClane, goes off to California to spend time with his estranged wife and his family for Christmas. He was invited to spend his holiday season on the West Coast, and you see him, he attends his wife's Christmas party. You have Christmas references all throughout the movie, and you know, even at the very end, they wish each other a very Merry Christmas and all that, as you see the ending credits roll as they play a famous Christmas tune as well. And overall, it's just a really fun movie. We're introduced to such a great action star in Bruce Willis, John McClane there as a character that spawned multiple sequels throughout its franchise history, and we really got to see like an everyday man kind of fill in the role of action star. Plus, we were introduced to one of the most iconic villains in cinema history, and that is Hans Gruber, played by the late great Alan Rickman. You cannot state how huge this role was, especially when it comes to all-time villains in movie history. And a lot of people here in the US were not familiar or exposed to Alan Rickman. So this was one of the first times we got to see Alan Rickman on the big screen, and boy, were we pleasantly surprised and pleased. And obviously we know Alan Rickman spawned off a huge career in movies and has played a lot of iconic roles throughout his lifetime, but a lot of people will always go back to Hans Gruber, the infamous villain in Die Hard. So if you want to ring in the holidays with some flair and a bit of spice, Die Hard is the movie for you. Now, when I consider a great Christmas movie, I also take into account rewatchability. Something that, year after year, you could always watch over and over again. And one of those movie franchises that kind of came out of nowhere and surprised a lot of us was Home Alone. Home Alone came out in November of 1990, and whether or not you want to believe that a little kid in the burbs of Illinois can be left home alone all by himself and take on two robbers by tricking them and doing pretty much what reminds me of an American Ninja Warrior set or something out of Wipeout. That is something that you could kind of suspend your belief and all that and just enjoy the movie for what it is. And it's a fun comedy action romp from start to finish. And I know, you could go on and we could talk about how Kevin McAllister is the most sadistic, evil, twisted little genius out there. The way that he comes up with all these different ways to torture these two poor guys who all they want to do is make some money for the holidays, whether or not you agree with their methods or not. Let's just face it, Kevin's family is probably the worst family out there. I mean, there's not a single one of them that I would say I love the most, except for Catherine O'Hara, who always finds a way to redeem herself. But also you have to recognize the great history of this movie and what it's done for cinema. When it came out in November of 1990, it was one of the highest grossing live action comedy movies of all time. And at that time, that was very rare for what was considered to be a Christmas movie. Plus, it had a long-lasting run in the box office. When it came out in November, it was still in theaters through February of the following year, which is a rare feat, especially at that time. I remember back in the day seeing the ads in the newspaper saying extended for a couple more weeks or back on the big screen for another week or two. It was very, very huge, and obviously it was a no-brainer that it was going to eventually spawn a sequel that came out in 1992, which was Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. And again, someone who lives in New York, I thought this movie was fantastic. Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern as the main villains there, and then some would say in Home Alone 2 you have an added villain there with a brief cameo of Donald Trump, which is very iconic in its own way. But you also had great actors like Tim Curry and Rob Schneider appear in the second installment of this franchise. The first movie you had the family rushing off to Paris, forgetting Kevin at home. And then in the second movie, you have the family rushing off to New York. And even though Kevin made it to the airport with them, they got separated and went on separate planes. And, Kevin made it to New York and made his way through there. It was also one of those movies that spawned off a very popular toy at the time, which was the Talk Boy. You see him using it all throughout the second movie, and this became a hot ticket when it came to toys out in the market during that time. Also, a lot of people will laugh and joke about his little relationship with the homeless pigeon lady. Kevin is staying at the Park Plaza and, having this grand old time, living it up like there's no tomorrow. And poor little old lady here can't even get her next decent meal. And all he ever does is buy her a cup of hot chocolate and give her a pair of turtle dove ornaments, or one turtle dove ornament. And it's like, hey, now we could be friends forever. Bye. if you watch the recent SNL that aired recently here in during this time, they even made fun of that and joked about it and all that. So again, suspend your belief. Enjoy the movie for what it is, the hijinks and the slapstick comedy and all that. Home Alone is definitely a movie franchise that is in rotation every time I catch up on the holiday movies. And let's not even bother talking about parts 3 or what have you later on down the line, because in my opinion, they just don't exist. Now, a newer classic that I added to my list in recent years is the movie Elf. And Elf is one of those movies that really surprised me with not only how hilarious it was, but also how charming it was as well. This movie came out in 2003 and it was directed by Jon Favreau, which a lot of people don't even remember that, but this was one of Jon Favreau's earlier movies that he directed, and who knew that later on he would be the guy that started off the MCU with Iron Man and now is part of the biggest Star Wars series out there in Star Wars franchise history, The Mandalorian. But he directed this movie Elf with the main star of Will Ferrell, who just came off of his tremendous appearance in Old School. So this was definitely during Will Ferrell's rise to stardom and peak, which eventually led to Anchorman and all these other iconic roles. But you have Will Ferrell, who plays the main character Buddy, who was an orphan and kind of hitched a ride on Santa's sleigh and then ended up on the North Pole, where he was eventually raised by elves. His father, who was played by legendary comedic actor Bob Newhart. Then he learns that he has a real biological father who lives in New York and sets sail, goes to New York, and that's where all the hijinks begin. One of the great things I love about this movie is that we were also introduced to not only a very attractive but a very adorable and charming Zooey Deschanel, who was a great kind of counterpart to Buddy, and it kind of ended up becoming his love interest. But the main standout of this movie is James Caan, who plays his biological father, and the chemistry between those two was really hilarious and well put together. And it's very rare that we got to see James Caan in a comedy role like that. But this movie has it all. It has Christmas, comedy, and it has a Game of Thrones connection because Tyrion Lannister himself, Peter Dinklage, has a cameo in this movie. And again, this was our first exposure to Peter Dinklage in any form of media. He's debuted earlier in some other movies, but this was the first time that he found himself in a well-received movie of its own. So, and then later on, we all know what happened to him and his career and how it blew up from there. So, again, great classic movie. You have Santa Claus that is played by Ed Asner, another iconic Hollywood actor there. And what can I say about this movie? This is a movie that I can watch year over year, and it brings a lot of laughs, heartfelt moments, and Will Ferrell, during this time when he's on, and this was definitely a movie where he was on all the way. Now, when it comes to all-time classic Christmas stories, nothing can compare to the famous Dickens tale, A Christmas Carol. And all throughout history, A Christmas Carol has been adapted in so many different forms of media, whether it be TV programming, movies, radio shows, cartoon skits, comedy skits, what have you. We've seen so many adaptations of A Christmas Carol, and a lot of them are great. But for me personally, nothing beats the dark and twisted comedic adaptation of A Christmas Carol, none other than Scrooged, who stars Bill Murray. Scrooged came out in 1988 and a lot of controversy behind the making of this film because Bill Murray was just not feeling it, and I think he was feeling a lot of pressure after Ghostbusters became such a huge hit, and he couldn't really deal with a lot of the fame and popularity that generated from that movie. So he actually took a 4-year hiatus until he finally decided to star in this leading role of Scrooged, directed by Richard Donner. And if you read some of the behind the scenes, like everyone was saying that he was very difficult to work with, but he did have a lot of input on the script and all that, and I think it played out very well because it was a role that was geared towards his comedic sensibilities, and I think it was a well put together movie. And one of the things that I really love about this is that it really took the story of A Christmas Carol and the character Scrooge and put it in a very modernized setting, and in a setting that a lot of us can relate to, it being the late 80s. Bill Murray plays a character, Frank, who is kind of like a TV mogul, very successful TV executive who runs a television station, and he was tasked to put together the ultimate Christmas television program. So what he decided to do was that they were going to do a live adaptation to be aired on TV of A Christmas Carol, but him being the character that he is, he decided to go ahead and spruce it up and spice it up. You have showgirls in it. You have, at the time, very famous gymnast Mary Lou Retton playing the role of Tiny Tim. And it was a bananas, romp of a production that he was planning to do. But on Christmas Eve, he fires one of his employees who kind of messed up, who was played by Bobcat Goldthwait. And again, if you're a fan of movies in the 80s, you are very familiar with him, and you're going to be very familiar with a lot of actors and actresses within this movie because it has a lot of great 80s characters in here. But that's what starts off the series of events when he gets visited by the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. You got Buster Poindexter, who plays the ghost of Christmas past, Carol Kane, who plays the ghost of Christmas present, and it's just a non-stop, really crazy, dark, humorish kind of story from start to finish there. You have other famous actors and actresses of the time like Karen Allen, John Glover, just to name a few. But you also get to see a very young Alfre Woodard, who plays the mom of the little boy who is the Tiny Tim of this movie. And again, another really great touching moment when all things come together at the end there, when the character of Frank finally realizes the errors of his way, and he just wants to now spread love and cheer to everybody. He changes everything up when it comes to the production at the end. He brings everyone together, and the movie ends pretty much in this joyous, live sing-along in a very 80s style fashion way. And he allows the audience to sing along too, breaking the fourth wall, conversing with the audience watching. And it was, for me, just a really fun movie to watch, and it's really, really enjoyable. And me being a huge Bill Murray fan, I really enjoyed this, and I do add this to my top 5 here of Christmas movies. But I'm very curious as to what you think about it, because whenever I bring this movie up, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I remember that movie. Oh, I heard of that movie, but I never saw it. So curious to see what you guys think out there. And also, how many Murray brothers can you actually find in this movie? Because there are a couple, and we all know the Murrays are pretty huge in Hollywood right now, or at the time. Now we get down to my number 1 all-time favorite Christmas movie. And if my ugly sweater doesn't give it away already by now, that is the movie Gremlins. Gremlins is one of those crazy, way out there movies, perfect for the 80s when it came out in 84, directed by Joe Dante. It is categorized as a comedy horror, but I think it's a Christmas comedy horror because it has everything that you need in a Christmas movie. You have small U.S. town, during the holidays. You have happy families, two people who are crushing over each other and finding young love, gift giving, a strange creature that spawns evil, that eventually spawns off these little evil versions of itself that wreak havoc around the town, looting, breaking things, murder. Okay, well, maybe it's not your traditional Christmas story, but overall it is a fun and enjoyable movie in my opinion, and it's very entertaining and oftentimes very hilarious. I mean, this is one of the movies that also is held very dear to my heart because it has remained and never been broken in my own personal movie watching records and history. This is the only movie that I've watched the most times in the theater, clocking in at 8. Yes, I've watched Gremlins in the movie theater 8 times. I don't know what it was about this movie. I don't know if it was because I found Gizmo, the little Mogwai, so cute, driving around in his little Barbie toy car, or just the craziness and wackiness of all the gremlins running amok. But it really caught my attention at that time, and I remember my mom took me to see it for the first time. 1 week later, she took me again to see it. And then for the next couple of weeks, sometimes even twice a week, my babysitter will take me, just to calm me down because, I wasn't having a good day, or, I was just antsy and all that stuff like that. But yeah, saw this movie multiple times. And what's not to really love about this movie? The story itself is very innovative, even though it's very campy and cheesy when it comes to like the overall plot of the movie. You got the father there looking for a perfect present for his son to bring back home. He finds himself in this dingy little shop in Chinatown, and he comes across this unusual looking creature, and you have the old man telling him, no, you cannot take him because no one can handle the Mogwai. And then he takes him, but then he has to follow by the rules, and of course we all know the rules by now. Can't get him wet, can't expose him to bright light, and you can't feed him after midnight. After midnight, I mean, we believed it back then. Why can't we believe it now? I mean, yes, I know it must be midnight somewhere, but hey, that's the story we were given, and we ran with it. And as we saw, it led to lots of hijinks and all that. Plus, we were kind of pleasantly presented with, at that time, one of my earliest childhood crushes, and that is Phoebe Cates. She was very charming in this movie and played the great role of the crush, the love interest in the movie. And pop quiz for you guys out there too. Who voiced little Gizmo, the little Mogwai, with none other than iconic comedian at the time, who now eventually is your America's Got Talent judge, Howie Mandel. Howie Mandel did a lot of voices back in the day, even up until the 90s and 2000s. And one of his earliest credits in doing voices was Gremlins, where he voiced Gizmo. So yeah, this movie has a lot of good stuff going for it. And like I said, it is quite hilarious at times. I mean, yeah, even though you have the little gremlins running around and like wreaking havoc and, killing people and all that stuff like that, they prove to be very hysterical. I mean, who can forget that infamous bar scene, when you have all the gremlins drinking and partying, you have one flashing Phoebe Cates, you have a jazz-like gremlin, and you have a break-dancing gremlin, dancing like flash dance and all that stuff like that. And one of the other funniest moments was when they all decided to hunker down in the movie theater and watch Snow White and sing along with the music there. So again, from the beginning to the end, you have a lot of crazy stuff going on, and it was just an enjoyable movie. And I recently just watched it a week ago, and still it holds up for me. A really great movie to watch, fun, entertaining. you have a badass mom, one of the most badassest mom out there who took on 3 gremlins all by herself. That's a mom not to mess around with, and my mom is pretty fierce, but this mom has something going on there. But great movie, classic, iconic movie there. Unfortunately, it did have a sequel that didn't really live up to the original. When you got a female gremlin, trying to woo her way through things, and yeah, let's not even talk about that right now. It's but anyway, Gremlins, my all-time favorite Christmas movie there. And yeah, I'm curious, please share with me what your top 5 Christmas movies or all-time Christmas classics are for you guys out there. Interested to hear about your thoughts about this list. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think I'm crazy? Well, too late for that. But anyway, guys, have a Merry Christmas. Enjoy your holidays, and I will catch you again next time. Bye. Oh hey guys, thanks again for watching. If you want to check out my other videos, make sure to access them through this menu that you see on this side of the screen. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, or hit that logo you see right here on this side of the screen. I've always wanted to do that. Catch you next time.